Hotep, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here again with my co-host, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste, brother.
And we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience, to what is another edition of Community Cop. This is where truth and real talk occurs. We've been gone for a couple of weeks, so we're glad to be back. Mike, I'm pretty sure your fans are very happy to see you once again, as I'm sure you're happy to be here once again.
Blessed and highly favored, trying to make my word my bond.
All right, because bond is life. All right, as is customary, we like to go real quick into our historical piece. Michael, why don't you remind our viewing audience of some of the occurrences that happened on this date or during this month?
Well, with respect to time, let me just briefly say that this is the anniversary of when the Underground Railroad really took off under Harriet Tubman and so many others, Ruggles and so many others who were a part of that. So let's remember that date, 420, and keep that in mind always. 420 is when it first started. And Lucy Craft Laney, master educator, master teacher, she was just phenomenal, born 11 years before slavery ended. She dedicated her whole adult life to the education of our children. Took issue with some of the things that Booker T. Washington and others did, but she was phenomenal in her own right, and we should never forget that name. You get a chance, look it up. Lucy Craft Laney, one of the best we've ever produced. And last but not least, the Central Park jogger case. 1989, so many of our listeners were around when this happened. Certainly we know the travesty and what happened, the injustice and all the things that occurred simultaneously with that and what happened after that. But in the event, let's keep that in our memory, the Central Park jogger case. This is the anniversary.
All right, and just so happens that one of the victims who was charged in the domestic violence rape case is running for political office in Harlem. So it'll be interesting to see how much support he can garner in the Harlem community. But since we've last been here, Michael, there's so many things that have happened. So we have so much to talk about. So let's get right into it. My first story, I want to talk about something that occurred recently in Manhattan Criminal Court, where you had District Attorney Bragg, who's the District Attorney of Manhattan, recently got an indictment in the grand jury against former President Donald Trump. Since the indictment, grand jury indictment, Donald Trump has made some ferocious criticism of DA Bragg. Some may even think is borderline threatening. Michael, why don't you talk about that for our viewing audience?
Well, I'll just say for the record that certainly when you can get a 34-count indictment, I think it's 34 counts, against a former president, then you've done your homework, and obviously you're on to something where there's smoke, there's fire, if you can get a 34-count indictment. And certainly for him to be as irresponsible and childlike as he is, to talk about a possible death threat, to put it in his words, he called it potential death and destruction. Presidents are diplomatic. They don't speak like that. Children speak like that. Nut jobs speak like that. Sociopaths speak like that. Psychologically imbalanced people speak like that. Not former presidents, not people that ran the entire nation. So, the MAGA, those who wear the MAGA hats and have that MAGA mentality, they should be ashamed of themselves. DA Alvin Bragg received a letter with death threats in it and a white powdery substance that was non-hazardous. I'll say it was non-hazardous. It didn't have anything that can kill him in it, but certainly a threat is a threat, and they broke the law, and certainly anybody involved in that should be brought to swift justice.
And of course, we're no advocates of the system, some call the criminal justice system. We call it the system of criminal injustice. But as you stated, Michael, a lot has to be said by the response from the former president of this country. You would figure he would be a little more responsible. I mean, if he disagrees with the indictment, and of course, there's a cliche which states that the grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. So it's not surprising that the district attorney was able to get an indictment, because everybody gets indicted just about in the grand jury.
Right.
But figured that he would allow his attorneys to do the talking in terms to counteract what the district attorney did, as opposed to going on these rants. It's very undiplomatic, unlike a president of the United States to respond in such a fashion, but that's typical for Donald Trump. Now, presently, Republicans have convened a meeting in Manhattan to criticize the Manhattan district attorney, accusing him of political attacks on Donald Trump. They see this indictment and this investigation, as well as others, as being purely political. What are your feelings on that, Mike?
Well, I would say that certainly these are the same people in the Republican Party that advocated the arrest, and not only the arrest, but the incarceration of Bill Clinton. And whatever problems Bill Clinton had, certainly he wasn't charged with of a criminal nature, other than lying to Congress with respect to improper advances outside of his marriage. So that's so small in comparison. And then for these people to say, lock her up with respect to his wife, and then to look at the fact that they call the FBI predatory animals. They spoke out against various police agencies that did some of the research. How do you turn around and now the very things that you're supposed to stand for, the Republican Party and law and order, is supposed to be synonymous? Yet they believe in disorder, they believe in distrust, they don't trust the election results. They have a problem with if there's an impropriety in a person's marriage. If you're a Democrat, they want to bring that out. But somehow all of the dalliances that Trump has had, somehow they want to dismiss that as, mind your business. So you can't have it both ways. If you're supposed to be the political party of law and order, then act like it. Act like an adult in the room for a change. And if you can't do that, then stop talking about justice, fair play, what have you, in a situation where he's going to be judged by a jury of his peers, and an indictment doesn't mean he's guilty. So let the justice system wear itself out and see where it goes. But to make these threats against the FBI, to shoot at an FBI building, that person was killed, by the way, that fired those rounds at the FBI building, and to encourage people like that to do things with respect to police officers, federal agents, it's just irresponsible.
All right, my closing comments on this is, one of the unique things that I've noticed about these powerful white males, be they elected officials, the heads of multi-billion-dollar corporations, is they believe in the legal system as long as they agree with it. When they don't agree with it, they want to do away with it. They believe in democracy whenever it empowers them. They believe in capitalism when it empowers them. They believe in some religions, be it Christianity, Judaism, et cetera, as long as these principles or these concepts empower them, they go right along with it, they support it. But once they have a disagreement with it, then they want to throw it out with the bathwater. My second closing point is, in terms of the prosecution of Donald Trump, former president, which is, although not normal, not the norm, I'm reminded that these same prosecutors, be they international or national, didn't prosecute President Reagan when he imported cocaine into the country. There was no call for an investigation or a prosecution for him. There was no call or investigation of President Bush when he engaged in causing this country into an illegal invasion of Iraq, claiming that they had weapons of mass destruction. It's now a noted fact that he lied, that the individuals, his FBI agents and his military personnel who testified before the United Nations, lied. The whole world engaged in the toppling of a sovereign nation, Iraq, and the murder of its presidents, Saddam Hussein. There was no prosecution. There was no investigation. President Bush acknowledged and admitted that he ordered that prisoners of Abu Ghraib be tortured, which is an international crime. There was no investigation, no call for justice or prosecution. So I see a contradiction in prosecutors throughout the country, be it the highest one in the nation or local prosecutors, allow these other presidents to commit crimes, knowingly commit crimes, because the Reagan administration knowingly imported cocaine into the country during the crack cocaine epidemic, which of course malinfected our community, but there was no prosecution. So historically, presidents have gotten away, and that's including President Obama, who invaded, supported an invasion of a sovereign nation, Iraq, and the murder of his president, Gaddafi. No prosecution, and no international prosecution as well. So anyways, that's my closing comments on that. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just want to just say that to those who might not be familiar with what you're talking about, you're talking about when America was in a clandestine war and trying to unroot the Nicaraguan government, the Sandinistas. To finance it, they sold drugs primarily on the West Coast, and they were caught by a police officer. Actually caught them, a federal agent, no, a police officer, pardon me, actually caught them and discovered that it was actual CIA agents who was unloading all that cocaine in the Black communities. And the other thing you talked about in terms of presidential misconduct, look no further than President Richard Nixon, who had supposedly a war on crime. It was not a war on crime, it was war against Black people. And one of his trusted staffers, Ehrlichman, was able to tell us after the fact that it was not a war against drugs, it was a war against Black people. And they used the FBI to break into so-called militant organizations, Black Panther Party. They surveyed the Nation of Islam and any Black organizations which they did not totally control. They used surveillance to track what they were doing, and they broke in the doors, disrupted houses, arrested people, made you deplete your resources, which destroyed some organizations.
All of that illegal, and there was no prosecution, no convictions, no indictments of all of the president's criminal actions that were conducted by former presidents. All right, fast forward to something that had recently occurred, a tragic incident in Kansas City, where we had a 16-year-old man who was trying to locate his brother, his younger brother. He accidentally knocked on the wrong door. His name is Paul Ralph Earl. He was 16 years old. And then, to get his younger brother, he knocked on the door of a 85-year-old named Andrew Lester. Andrew Lester took it upon himself to fire at least two shots at our young brother, Paul Ralph, hitting him once in the head. And while he fell to the ground, walked up to him again and shot him.
That's right.
Of course, his explanation or his excuse for this carnage is to stand your ground. The stand your ground law is a law that's been enacted which states that a person has a right to defend himself. This was definitely not a stand your ground situation. This young man posed no threat to him. He was simply knocking on his door, attempted to get his brother. He thought he was at one address when he was at another. So there's really no excuse for this 85-year-old. He was recently arrested, I guess because of the outcry, the national outcry and the protest that was called for him to be arrested. He was initially taken into custody and released after 24 hours. I believe that if there wasn't a large protest and if this wasn't a national story, they would have swept this crime under the carpet. Michael, what are your comments on this particular shooting?
Yeah, I would just add, because I think you covered it well, I would just say that that young man who was looking for the proper address to find his little brother was as innocent as the day is long. And certainly there's no excuse for an 85-year-old to mistake a little boy that's looking for his brother, just ringing the doorbell. there's no reason to pull out a weapon and to unload other than your 85 years of sickness that you hate Black people and you believed everything you've been taught to mistrust the skin that is Black. And certainly that's why he unloaded on that young man. That young man posed no threat. And it's disgusting that they just held him long enough just for whatever they constituted as an investigation and let him go. And I agree with you. It was only the upcry that got him arrested.
Because Michael, you know for a fact, if it was role reversal and the racial component of this was reversed, it definitely wouldn't have been no 24, release after 24 hours. And, the stand your ground law on paper gives citizens the opportunity to defend themselves, meaning they don't have to retreat. If they're being attacked, they can respond. That's what the law states on paper. But far too often what we're seeing all around the nation is racist whites are abusing this particular law and taking advantage of the opportunity of them being armed and in the face of an African American, they automatically cry that they feel threatened and they had a right to use self-defense, even if there's no self-defense, even if there's no threat, there's no attack, no imminent danger whatsoever. That's what they claim, that they were in fear for their safety. So over and over again, we're seeing throughout the nation the abuse of this particular law. And we want to talk about real quick, Michael, another story where this particular stand your ground law is being abused in Texas. Governor Abbott is requesting that a state board pardons Sergeant Daniel Perry, who was convicted of murdering 28-year-old Garrett Foster, who was participating in the Black Lives Matter protest. Sergeant Daniel Perry was convicted of murder, and before he's even sentenced, Governor Greg Abbott is requesting that the board grant him a pardon. This is highly unprecedented. They recently released comments of Perry, who expressed on his text to friends that I might have to kill a few people on my way to work. They are outside my apartment complex. So that to me speaks of intent. He had an animist attitude towards individuals who participated in the Black Lives Matter protest. So in my opinion, this shows that he was looking for an opportunity to use his weapon so he can claim stand your ground protection. Michael.
Well, let me just add to that that not only did he say that he might have to kill a few people en route to work, which is documented that he said that, but he went on to say that with respect to shooting Foster with his AR-15, he went on to say he told the detective, I didn't want to give him a chance to aim at me. So he admitted that the person never aimed the weapon at him. So how could he later say he was defending himself when he told the detective on the scene, I didn't want to give him the opportunity to aim a weapon at me, so I shot him first. So that stand your ground, it has no bearing. Now, the fact of law is Texas law does not allow a governor to request to the Board of Pardons and Paroles if a person should be granted a pardon. Now, some states do, but in that particular state, you can only recommend after the board agrees that a person has earned the right to be looked at for a pardon. So he's acting inappropriately because Texas does not permit that. They're hardliners, so they don't permit that. So in any event, when you look at that, and then when you look at his dream, he dreamed of standing in front of on top of a rooftop and imagining him with a MAGA hat and a megaphone hollering at the people, this is a countdown, you better get out of here, with his AR-15. And when he counts down to 0, he said it's open season. He said that was in his imagination that he wanted to do that and just start firing from the rooftop, hitting people while they were running away. This is a crazed sociopath. And for Greg Abbott to use his bully pulpit of a governor's office to free a man like that just because he ran over and got out. He ran and injured people and then got out of his car and shot Foster. This is a crazed mind that should not be considered. He was convicted for what he did in 2020. And for him to this soon now be recommended for parole, it makes absolutely no sense. Pardon me. That's even better, a pardon.
And Michael, for you to come on the program and to state what the law is in Texas, you know, when you imagine the governor knows that his comments and his actions are incorrect and it's illegal and it's set no precedent for a governor to suggest such. And you know, clearly, when you listen to how passionate he is for freeing someone who has been convicted of murder, in spite of what you just stated, he articulated some intentions of harming people involved in the Black Lives Matter protest before he actually did it. So, you know, when you look at what his words is and follow up by his actions, you know, that is clearly the stamp of guilt. And that's why he was found guilty by jurors of his jury, you know, of his peers. And for the governor to just intervene, to just be so outraged of his conviction, shows the level of sympathy the governor has with the individual who killed protester that was involved in the Black Lives Matter movement.
Well, and he also said that he wished that he was being paid to kill Muslims in Europe.
Right.
So, I mean, you talking about a depraved mind. I mean, where does the governor get off in even considering letting go somebody like that? Now, look, I'm not a fan of Black Lives Matter, but they should not be run down.
The organization Black Lives Matter, not
the organization. Pardon me. Yes, I love Black people.
Yes,
love them, love them, love them. But I'm not a big fan of Black Lives Matter. However, I could hear somebody out there saying, "Well, brother, isn't it hypocritical? Didn't yourself and your organization go to a governor to free a Black man who was accused of killing somebody?" Hell yeah. A Black man, John White. John White was a Black man who was defending his wife and his son from 7 night riders. You talking about road agents, real Ku Klux Klan type night riders who surrounded his house, threatening to rape his wife and kill his son. All he did was back them up off of his property, and then a young white man tried to take a gun out of his hand. He thought he was Moses Powell, and he found out he wasn't. He thought he could take a gun out of a Black man's hand, and he found out he couldn't do it. So John White didn't kill anybody. Consequently, yes, 100 Blacks in law enforcement did go to Governor Patterson to free John White, and we're proud of it.
Right. All right. Okay, the next story that might be on a lot of people's mind. Recently in Tennessee, State House representatives expelled 2 African-American who were elected officials for participating in the protests against the proliferation of illegal guns and legal guns in this country.
Whereas, during the House floor session on March 30th, 2023, Justin Jones of Davidson County, along with Gloria Johnson of Knox and Justin Pearson of Shelby County, did knowingly and intentionally bring disorder and dishonor to the House of Representatives through their individual and collective actions. Mr. Speaker, how can you bring dishonor to an already dishonorable House? How can you bring disorder to a House that is out of order, where the Speaker refuses to let representatives elected to speak for their people even be heard? How do you bring dishonor and disorder to a chamber that does not follow decorum, due process, constitutional rights, or the rules that they enact themselves? There is no equal application of law or rules as we see in this chamber, as we saw today.
There was a shooting, another shooting, one of over 100 that has occurred so far in this country, where multiple individuals were killed. These state officials were so outraged, they performed a protest in the State House against those individuals who support Americans having these high-power weapons. Michael, as a result, the constituents of these two elected officials posted a protest, and one of them have thus far been reelected, which
Both
is
of them, both of them.
both of them were put back on post. What was questionable when these two individuals participated in the protest at the State House, they were joined by a white female representative who was not voted out of office. And so many people point out the contradiction. Michael, speak on that particular story.
Well, Noel, oftentimes, we get accused of looking at things through black eyes only, as if that limits our scope. The reality is the white woman admitted that the reason she wasn't expelled is because of the color of her skin. Mm. She admitted that. Now, the other two brothers who were expelled, the speaker, the House Speaker, and his name is Cameron Sexton. He said they were grandstanding. They knew that they were engaged in misconduct. Consequently, they broke the House rules and they got what their hand called for. That's basically what he said.
Let's talk about expulsion. For years, one of your colleagues who was an admitted child molester sat in this chamber. No expulsion. One member sits in this chamber who was found guilty of domestic violence. No expulsion. We had a former speaker sit in this chamber who is now under federal investigation. No expulsion. We have a member still under federal investigation. No expulsion. We had a member pee in another member's chair in this chamber. No expulsion. In fact, they're in leadership, but in the governor's administration. And so once again, what you're saying to us, since you're trying to put us on trial, I'll say what you're really putting on trial is the state of Tennessee.
Now, the facts is, if you look at him closely, in 2018, there was accusations that a man named David Byrd, who was a state representative, he was accused of sexual assault of teenagers because he used to coach basketball. So he raped several teenagers. Cameron Sexton did not recommend he lose his seat. He later said his rationale was, well, he didn't want to uproot the right of voters to have their representative in office. Well, that was not a reservation of his when it came to these two brothers. They were duly elected. So look at that. One leading a protest to save children's lives because children were just killed. In the other case, this man raped young teenagers. And yet, he said he doesn't want to overturn the voters' choice. That shows you, so you can accuse 100 blacks all you want of saying, oh, well, we look at things in white and black. Damn it, how do they look at it? When Mario Cuomo saw that Italian children were looking more up to Gotti than looking towards higher education, him and his wife Matilda did something about it. They had to change curriculums and put a program in place to get Italians to stop thinking about young Italian men, stop thinking about being gangsters, and to think about higher education. Well, then look at this case. He saw himself in that white man's shoes and decided, even though he was raping children, that was not egregious. But for two black men to think they're uppity enough to come in there with a bullhorn and challenge the House, that's just a little bit too much for him to stomach. Therefore, he had them removed.
Right. And so many of these stories that we talked about so far, the point of all of this is racism in America is alive and well. And we're not talking about some little bar. We're not talking about in some alleyway. We're not talking about some trailer park. We're not talking about one of these little corners, the extreme elements of society. We're talking about state houses. We're talking about governorships. We're talking about officers. And this just shows that racism, white supremacy is alive and well in America. And, I think it's preposterous, when you talk about the power and the influence that these state legislatures, including the governors, have, and when they show just the outright biasness. Michael.
Yes, you have to remember that as a governor, this is the most exclusive club in America. There's 100 senators. There's 435 Congress people, but it's only 50 governors in all of America. Just 50, that's exclusive. Many of them have powers that haven't been changed since they were colonies. That's why they can pardon people. That's why they have such awesome power. They can protect who they want to protect and hurt people that they want to hurt. So in this particular case, the speaker is who he is. So we can look at these situations and see the Senate, the U.S. Senate, the House, governors, the president's office. That's the entire American government.
Facts.
So we're talking about a white supremacist government from top to bottom. So if we're not gonna call them out, who gonna call them out if we don't? So that's why we're doing this tonight. We're calling them out.
Exactly. All right, we want to talk about a story in Oklahoma. An Oklahoma sheriff and other county officials. We're talking about the sheriff, the head man, and other county officials were recently recorded. They're under fire now for recording, chatting about lynching Black people. There was a reporter who left a tape recording, who attended the meeting, stepped out of the room, but he left his recorder in. And some people think that this is a repetitive story, but this just recently happened. It's not an old story that we're resurrecting. This recently happened in Oklahoma, and you had county officials talking about lynching Black people. One of the men said, if it was back in the day when we would take a damn Black guy and whoop his behind and then throw him in the cell, he said, I'd run for sheriff for that. One of the council people said, the elected officials. Another person said, we would take them, back in the days, we would take them down to the creek and hang them with a damn rope. But you can't do that anymore. And as if he was lamenting that, that can no longer happen. And the head investigator, Monday night, McCurtain, who's a representative of the sheriff's office, when he was brought to these facts, he reluctantly said that he's going to conduct an investigation. Here you have elected officials talking about lynching Black people, being sorry that they can no longer lynch Black people, being sorry that they can no longer just assault a Black person, just throw them in jail. This is 2023, and you have elected officials, you have sheriffs, head law enforcement officials talking like this, and they're, thinking that they're in their private, domain. Michael, any comments on this particular story? Now, you surprised?
Well, you've identified the actual police agency that did that, but certainly that can be applied to so many police agencies across the country that refer to us as monkeys, animals, beasts, refer to the places we live as jungles and what have you. So I would say that that's across the board. We actually talked about a case, we've talked about it a few times, with 3 young children, 3 females, were in a car and the police started chasing them. They got scared and drove the car into a pond. And the police actually, 3 deputy sheriffs actually stood there and watched them drown in the car and just saw them go under, made no attempts to rescue them, called in no backup help to help get that car out of the pond, and just let them drown. And you overheard them on the radio saying, well, I guess they didn't make it. I guess they dead now. So they make mockery when things like that. 3 young children, 2 15, I think, and 1 16-year-old, killed like that. They were the ones that forced them into the pond by chasing them. They should have been responsible and cut off the chase, let the 3 girls stop and get out of the car. Then you can question them, even though the car wasn't stolen. So in any event, I'm not surprised by things like this. I think white folks behind closed doors, this is how they talk. This is probably how the other Supreme Court judges talk about Clarence Thomas when he's not around, referring to him as a monkey. And this is the way our colleagues will talk about us when we're not around. So I'm not surprised at all by that. You know, black robes, white justice.
And Mike, I'm gonna tie another story to that since you brought up these racial stereotype, these racial comments. In California, more than 17 officers in California were recorded on text, and it is so silly for these law enforcement officers documenting this foolishness, referring to blacks as monkeys and gorillas, threatening to shoot their black mayor. This is in Contra, Costa County. And they called George Floyd a gorilla that died. And they boast about arresting black people simply for driving while black. And these are 17 police officers in this particular county were recorded making such statements. You know, this, you know, and one of the things I want to comment real quick before we go to another story, Michael, when President Biden and Kamala Harris was running for political office, when Donald Trump was in office, and you know, we had these outrageous shootings, these outrageous law enforcement occurrences. They were very vocal. They kind of blamed Donald Trump for setting the atmosphere for this kind of racist hostility towards African Americans. But they've been particularly quiet since all of this stuff is now happening under their administration. You know, they talked about police reform. They talked about criminal justice reform. This is Democratic President Biden and Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris, who all of these female fraternal groups saying that we need to get this sister in, you know, because, you know, whatever. But they've been silent of all of these stories and more, all of these incidents that are occurring all across the nation. Governors doing horrific things, law enforcement agencies, members of elected officials, you know, that are, you know, sit in powerful position. They've been, you know, peculiarly quiet and silent as it relates to the atmosphere that remains and has always been here years after Donald Trump has been out of office.
Yeah, I would say that, think about it. Michael Bloomberg did 12 years as the mayor here, 12 consecutive years as the mayor when he ran for president in 2020, pardon me. When he ran for president in 2020, he said that standard operating procedure, what you just described, police departments, business, corporations, the political structure is all geared toward destroying the black family. He admitted that. He's a businessman. He's worth over $60-70 billion. He admitted that business is set up that the black man will fail, the black woman will fail, and that white supremacy reigns supreme. He said that's the standard operation of business, the political structure. Consequently, he never said that as mayor. Now, why does he go down to Black Wall Street, downtown Oklahoma, where around black people, and say that for the first time? He never said that to us, Noel, when we was fighting him.
That's right.
He never said anything about this structure is set up to destroy black people. He never admitted that. But now when he wanted to run for president and he realized that Biden, by way of Obama, has got the inside track on black people, and he's got a black person, allegedly a black person, running with them. So he wanted to get some black votes. So what did he come up with? Admitting that the white power structure destroys the black family. So I'm not surprised by any police department, any political organization, any corporation when they do these things, because here you got one of their greatest businessmen, alleged businessmen in this country, Michael Bloomberg, admitted.
Right, and those who don't remember what Michael is talking about can Google it. You know, when he was attempting for a quick minute to run for president, he was pandering to his black audience like all, not most, but all white politicians do when they sit before Black audience and want their vote, and want their support. He made this admittance while attempting to garner their support, you know, by admitting that racism, white supremacy is throughout this country in all areas of human contact, be it education, economics, employment, labor, law, politics, sex, war, and religion. Racism, white supremacy, erase all fields of human activity in this particular country. And that was a real moment for Michael Bloomberg to tell that truth. You know, so.
That's right.
Another story, Michael, this indication or commentary on the criminal system of injustice that exists in this country. In Levitt, Texas, a young man who was involved in a domestic incident where police officers respond, and as they was locking him up, he reportedly spitted on the police officers, which we all know classifies as an assault. Michael, he was somehow given 70 years, a 70-year sentence for doing that.
Yes, well, look, first of all, let's remember Texas, you know, a major part of the former Confederacy. It is Southern justice at its finest. It is not called the Lone Star State for just by happenstance. It has reasons why it's called that, and continually distinguishes itself with how it treats Black people. Now, this Black man who got called by his girlfriend, called the police department in Lubbock, Texas, talking about a domestic violence situation. They responded and came and picked him up, and he allegedly spit at both of them. Consequently, the prosecutor said, we want to send a message that that will have impact. So they prosecuted him because in New York State, that's an assault in New York State. I don't know about every state, but in New York State, spitting because of the diseases that are afoot is considered an assault. So, but it's a misdemeanor, and he should not have received 70 years. So Texas should take off their books anything that says equal justice for all. Just say equal justice for white people, and Black people have no rights that we are bound to respect. I'd respect Texas more if it just says Black people have no rights that the state of Texas is bound to respect, because to be 36 years old and to have been convicted for a robbery once and also for domestic violence, and now you're gonna get 70 years for spitting on or at police officers, that absolutely makes no sense.
Right, and this is coming from a judge. So we'll follow that. I'm not certain whether or not, now that that particular story has gone public, whether the judge will reconsider, because that is beyond abusive sentences for one accused of spitting at police officers to receive 70 years. This just shows the mentality that that particular judge has, an animus that that particular judge has. And this is the problem with judgeships in this particular country, is everyone, it appears that overwhelming majority of judges bring their personal biases, their personal opinions on the bench when they make a decision. And this is why I said, even the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, when you have Democrats wanting to pick particular judges, Supreme Court justices, or you know, put them forward, that share their particular opinions, you know, be it on some of the, you know, fiery subjects that are out here. And the Republican president, when he selects judges or he nominates judges for the Supreme Court that fit with their political philosophy, only thing you wanted in a judge is that they're qualified, that they're independent, and that they're willing to make a decision based on the facts, not based on their personal opinion, not based on their political affiliations. But that's what we have in the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court. You know, Republicans pick certain judges, want certain judges and Democrat want certain judges. And all of it are those judges that are in line with their political philosophy on some of these fiery subjects. So of course that is transcending downwards from the Supreme Court down to state judges, to local judges. All of these judges have personal biases, personal opinions, and for a judge to sentence a young man to 70 years for spitting at police officers, even though spitting at police officers is horrific, we don't encourage that type of activity, but 7 years is beyond punitive, abusive, and that judge should really be off the bench because to sentence somebody for that long period of time, that's a manifestation of injustice.
Yeah, and I would just say that if you are a judge and you believe in respect for police officers, if you are a prosecutor and you believe in respect for police officers, then what happened to Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick? He was killed on January 6th. He died the next morning from an assault where his head was bashed in with a fire extinguisher in the Capitol building. Now, why was just 2 individuals charged with assault? The man died the very next morning. So they have no respect for the law. As you mentioned earlier, powerful white men, white supremacists, they will use the law when it's a part of their agenda. When it goes against the agenda, then they will just disrespect the law, cast it to the side, and then do what they want to do, because to sentence a 36-year-old man to 30 years as if he can't change his life and become a better person, it makes absolutely no sense.
Right, okay. A quick note, Michael, I meant to mention this earlier. George Chapman lost his appeal. He was the officer that murdered George Floyd. He recently lost his appeal for a retrial. That, of course, is good news because he didn't deserve one. Did you want to comment on that, Michael?
I'll just say quickly that he tried to get off of his second-degree murder conviction by his lawyer making the argument that that there was just massive pretrial publicity and legal and procedural errors in the case. So he was trying to get it retried, but a 3-judge panel said that they agreed with the way things were handled in his case and that there was no need for another trial. So as it stands right now, he has to still do 22.5 years for the murder of George Floyd.
Did you say 22.5 years or did you say 70 years?
Not even 70 months. He doing 22.5 years, not 70, 22.5 years.
A previous story, we had a black man who was accused of spitting at police officers, received 70 years. And in this story, we have a police officer on video murdering a black man, receiving 22 years.
Well, I guess they needed to see more than 9.5 minutes. If he went to the 10-minute limit with that knee on his neck, I think they would have gave him 70 years.
No,
but after 9.5 minutes, he took his knee off.
All right, okay. I doubt if they would have gave him 70 years, but be it as it may. All right, those sports enthusiasts who may remember, recently there was a championship game in the women's division of the NCAA between Iowa and Louisiana State University. The victors of, there were 2 star players, a sister Reese Angel for LSU, and Caitlin Clark, who's a white player from Iowa. She's an excellent player. She reminds me of Larry Bird. I'm talking about the Caitlin Clark. She has an excellent shot. But the reason why we're talking about this story, because Caitlin Clark is a known basketball player. She's known to mock other players. She's known to make comments at other players. But those of us who are involved in sports understand that's part of the game. Well, after in the past, Caitlin Clark, the white player, she had made some gestures to other players who, putting her face in front of hands. Those who watch Community Cop, when we were in the studio, say hello to little Mo. That's like, you can't see me. That was, I used to the wrestler John Cena, but that was just originally done by one of 50 Cent's artists. I can't think of the brother's name right now who started that. But be it as it may, the white player used to always do that when she defeated other players, and she made other comments. So the Reese Angel, who plays for Louisiana State University, prior to the game, they had articulated not liking some of her gestures. So they said that they were going to get her back after the game. They said this before, that they were kind of upset that she would kind of showboat other police officers because she's such a good player. And they said that they were going to get her, that they weren't going to lose. And once they were winning, and it was, known that they was going to win, Sister Reese went up to Kate Clark and did what she normally did to other players, put her hand in front of the face. Well, a lot of whites didn't like that. And there was some despicable, disrespectful comments made towards Sister Reese for doing what, and she was only mocking. The only reason why she did that comment because she's seen Kate Clark do it before.
Right.
That was the only reason why she did it. We had, let me see, Keith Olbermann called her an idiot, mindless, and classless. Now, these are two college students, basketball players who enjoy playing basketball, of course. But some white commentators and white people reported were so outraged because they really wanted Iowa to win. And for people to deny there's a racial component with these two schools, one mostly white, which is Iowa, one mostly black, which is LSU. And, there was a lot of attention given to this game because both teams have some excellent players. But the black LSU school won, with mostly black athletes. And there was such anger by some whites. Like I said, Keith Olbermann called Sister Reese an idiot, mindless, and classless. David Porter, who's owner of Bristol Sports, says he was a classless piece of, and then he used some profanity. Other people made some derogatory comments of the gall of her. And basically what they seen when she did back to the white player, what the white player normally does other black players as well. They seen their daughters being marked by a black female. That's why they took such offense. Even President wife stated, who was at the game, stated that she wanted to invite Iowa, both teams, to the White House. Those who don't know, it's customary in the last few years in all sports that championship teams, when they win the championship, they go to the White House, meet the president, and take a photo op. Biden's wife was at the game, and she had emotionally and mentally so connected with Iowa, with the predominantly white players. When they lost, she said, it's only right, we should invite both schools to the White House, which has never happened before. So that shows that she was mentally and emotionally connected to Iowa. Michael, in light of this little sports story and the level of disrespect that some white commentators and sports figures threw at our sister publicly, not privately, calling her bad things just for doing what the white player did to other players. What are some of your feelings, and what did you pick up on that? I know you were rooting for Iowa.
Well, Angel Reese is a real angel. She was about it. She had made it clear before the game because she saw what Caitlin Clark did to South Carolina.
Thanks.
And she said, you're not going to do that to us. You're not going to disrespect us the way you did South Carolina. Therefore, we putting you on notice. So when they were winning and they won 102-85, it was an easy win. It was hard fought, but an easy win. Domination. Dr. Jill Biden, the first lady, saw the way this white team was being dominated and handled that she took offense to it and empathized with these poor little white girls from Iowa. She was sitting with Billie Jean King of tennis fame, former tennis player, next to her. And so she empathized with the white team and said she was going to invite Iowa there to the White House. Now, obviously, the president's staff got wind of it and made her change it. And she never really apologized. Now, Angel Reese said, I'm not accepting her apology. Just want to tell you, Angel Reese, love you, sis, but she didn't apologize. She just changed her mind. In other words, the White House told her, you can't put that out there, that you're going to invite both teams. You can't do that. The White House brings in winners, not losers. And they got their butts kicked. But she identified with the white skin. It was a shallow skin analysis and did not look at it purely as an athletic event. She identified with them. Therefore, she got mad. And all those, whether it was Oberman or Cannell and so many others, well, Oberman called her an effing idiot, and Cannell said she was classless, and that how did her parents raise her to be that way? All of this out of a competitive element, but that's the same way things were when Western Texas, Texas Western played against Kentucky with Adolph Rupp, legendary white supremacist segregationist back in 1966.
Thanks.
That it drew, it was like what Dr. King used to talk about, the most segregated time in the country is 12 o'clock on Sundays, when black people are in the black church and white people in the white church. With this game, if you was white, you was with Kentucky. If you was black, Texas Western. And the same thing happened in football with Bear Bryant in Alabama, when Alabama played USC. If you was white, you was with the Bear. If you was black, obviously you was with USC. And Cunningham destroyed them, by the way. And they said when they saw that black guy coming, he said them white guys couldn't do nothing. And after that, even Bear Bryant started recruiting black players after that, after he got manhandled by Cunningham. Consequently, sometimes sporting events is more than a sporting event. So if you see the Central Park jogger case, it's more than just a criminal case. If you see what happened to Sandra Bland, if you see what happened to so many blacks in these politically charged cases, it's more than a case. So don't accuse 100 blacks of looking at things one-dimensionally. We see the whole picture. That's why we can call them out, because we see the whole picture, especially the hypocrisy of these governors, the hypocrisy of people that run state houses, the hypocrisy of the first lady, and Joe Biden himself. She's no more of a racist than he is. He was the one that said he didn't want little white girls sitting next to in a kindergarten oversized black males.
Thanks.
Now, I don't know what he meant by oversized. I mean, we could speculate. I don't know what he meant by that, but if it's of a sexual nature, he didn't want black male children around white female children. So that's why he was for segregation at that time, even though now this new Joe Biden would tell you that he doesn't have a racist bone in his body, but his wife just showed what the family is about.
Right. Okay. And this is good that you pointed out that racism in sports is historic, going back to Jack Johnson, to boxing,
Yes, sir.
To Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, when they played each other. So big up to our sister, and all of those racial epithets that were thrown to her by those sports commentators. I'm glad she's strong enough to ignore them, and she can care less about what they said about her. Mike, we have 1 minute. I don't know if you want to comment on this story with Britney Grimes or save it to next week. We have about 1 minute left.
We'll save it. I'll just say that they're mischaracterizing her as a social activist. She was a criminal that was caught smuggling at an airport in Russia. She pled guilty to those charges by having a controlled substance. Consequently, she did time in jail. She was tried, convicted to do 9 years, and was released early in a prisoner exchange program. Consequently, she's not the social activist that you're trying to make out to be. She's a lesbian basketball player, and she was well known, which is why she was released early in exchange for a prisoner.
Okay, closing comments, Mike.
Yeah, just want to say big ups, talk to Professor Leonard Jeffries a couple of days ago. He's fine and well. Visited Alton Maddox over the weekend. He said to tell you what's up, Noel. He said to give you his regards. And just want to say that again, Black man, Black woman, protect the Black child. In the words of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, accept your own and be yourself. Walk in peace.
And we always love you, Alton Maddox, attorney at war. Always love you, brother. On behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank our producers and engineers, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, and Veronica Kitt. Also, our brother, Big D. We'd like to thank you, our viewing audience, for watching. We see you next Tuesday. We definitely want to talk about what's going on internationally, especially as it relates to the African continent and what's going on with Russia, China, and the union between African nations under BRICS, which is some nations joins together to create their own financial institutions to counteract America and what that's going to look like in years to come. But thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Community Cop. Peace.